In a dimly lit casting room in 1987, something extraordinary happened that would send shockwaves through Hollywood's elite circles. A single VHS tape, grainy, unassuming, labeled only with a number, contained a performance so raw, so unexpected, that it left seasoned executives speechless. She wasn't on the list. She wasn't supposed to be there. But what happened in those 12 minutes would change everything. This is the story of the casting tape that Hollywood tried to bury, and the truth that finally came to light. The year was 1987, and Hollywood operated like a fortress of secrets. Behind the glamorous facade of red carpets and golden statues, the industry functioned on an unspoken code of silence. Casting directors held the keys to dreams, and their rooms were temples where careers were born or destroyed with a single no. It was in this environment that Meridian Pictures, a mid-tier studio with big ambitions, was desperately searching for their leading lady. The film, tentatively titled Midnight's Edge, was their attempt to break into the psychological thriller market that had been dominated by studios like Paramount and Warner Brothers. They needed someone unknown, fresh, but with the kind of presence that could carry a $15 million budget. The casting process had been grueling. For 3 months, they'd seen over 200 actresses, each one polished, prepared, and predictable. The executives, producer Harold Weinstock, casting director Maria Castellanos, and director Jonathan Pierce had grown weary of the endless parade of headshots and rehearsed monologues. But something was different about this particular Tuesday afternoon in September. The air in the Beverly Hills casting office felt heavier, charged with an electricity that none of them could explain. Little did they know, they were about to witness something that would haunt them for decades. The appointment book showed 15 scheduled auditions that day. But hidden between the lines of that neat, organized schedule was a name that wasn't supposed to be there. A name that would soon become the stuff of Hollywood legend. At 3:47 p.m., the casting assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. There's someone here for the 4 o'clock slot. But according to their records, the 4 o'clock slot was supposed to be vacant, a 15-minute break before the final auditions of the day. Maria Castellanos frowned at her clipboard. She'd been doing this job for 12 years, and she never made scheduling errors. Yet there, standing in the waiting room, was a woman she'd never seen before. Tall, with striking green eyes and auburn hair that caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows. She seemed to command attention without trying. "I'm sorry, but there seems to be some confusion," Maria began, approaching the woman with professional courtesy, masking her irritation. "Your name isn't on our—" "I know," the woman interrupted softly, her voice carrying a strange mixture of confidence and vulnerability. "But I had to come. I had to try." Her name, she said, was Rebecca Thorne, though later investigations would reveal this wasn't her real name. She claimed to have driven from Cortland that morning, sleeping in her car for 3 days outside the studio gates, waiting for the courage to walk in. Her story was compelling, desperate, and exactly the kind of thing that happened every day in Hollywood. Except something about her felt different. Harold Weinstock, who had been watching from the doorway, felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. In his 30 years in the business, he developed an instinct for recognizing star quality, and something about this woman set off every alarm bell in his mind, not in warning, but in recognition of something extraordinary. "Give her 5 minutes," he found himself saying, surprising everyone in the room, including himself. The casting room in Meridian Pictures wasn't much to look at: beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and a single camera mounted on a tripod in the corner. It was a place where dreams came to die as often as they were born. But as Rebecca Thorne stepped into that room, something shifted in the very atmosphere. She carried no headshot, no resume, no agent's business card. In an industry built on representation and connections, she was completely naked, professionally speaking. Director Jonathan Pierce, known for his impatience with unprepared actors, should have dismissed her immediately. Instead, he found himself inexplicably curious. "What scene would you like to perform?" Maria asked, shuffling through her stack of script pages. Rebecca shook her head gently. "I'd like to do something of my own, if that's okay." The three executives exchanged glances. This was highly irregular. Actors were supposed to read from the provided material. It was the only way to fairly assess their suitability for the role. But something in Rebecca's eyes, a depth that seemed to contain years of untold stories, made them nod in agreement. She positioned herself in front of the camera with the natural grace of someone who belonged there, as if the lens was an old friend rather than a judge. The red recording light blinked on, and in that moment, the mundane casting room transformed into something else entirely. A space where truth could be spoken and souls could be bared. What happened next would be debated, analyzed, and whispered about in Hollywood circles for decades to come. The performance began quietly, almost whisper-soft. Rebecca closed her eyes and seemed to draw something from deep within herself, a wellspring of emotion that had been waiting for this exact moment to surface. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer Rebecca Thorne. She had become someone else entirely. Her monologue, later transcribed from the tape, was a haunting piece about a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, not contemplating suicide, but liberation. The words flowed from her lips like poetry, but it was her eyes that told the real story. They held a pain so authentic, so raw, that Harold Weinstock found himself gripping the arms of his chair. "I've spent my whole life being someone else's idea of who I should be," she spoke to the camera, her voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow filling the entire room. "But standing here, with nothing left to lose, I finally understand what it means to be real." The camera continued rolling as she moved through what seemed to be an improvised scene, playing multiple characters: a mother, a daughter, a lover, a stranger. She shifted between them seamlessly, her posture, her voice, even her very essence changing with each transition. It was as if they were watching a master class in acting, performed by someone who had never taken a lesson. Jonathan Pierce, who had directed Academy Award winners, found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed. This wasn't just acting, this was something else, something deeper. It was as if Rebecca was channeling experiences that couldn't possibly be her own, yet felt utterly authentic. The 12 minutes felt like hours, and when she finally stopped, the silence in the room was deafening. For a full minute after the camera stopped rolling, none of the three executives spoke. The silence stretched so long that Rebecca began to shift uncomfortably, the confident persona she had inhabited during her performance melting away to reveal the vulnerable woman who had walked in off the street. Harold Weinstock was the first to break the silence. "Where did you train?" he asked, his voice hoarse with an emotion he couldn't name. "I didn't," Rebecca replied simply. "I just lived." Maria Castellanos, who prided herself on maintaining professional composure, found her hands trembling as she made notes on her clipboard. In 12 years of casting, she had never seen anything like what she had just witnessed. The performance had been so intimate, so brutally honest, that she felt almost voyeuristic having watched it. Jonathan Pierce stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to the room. His colleagues knew this was his tell what he did when he was processing something significant. "We need to talk," he said without turning around. "Privately," Rebecca nodded, understanding the dismissal. "Thank you for your time," she said, gathering her small purse and moving toward the door. But just before she left, she turned back. "Whatever happens, thank you for letting me try." The moment the door closed behind her, the room erupted into heated whispers. What they had just witnessed defied explanation. Here was an unknown actress, with no training or connections, who had just delivered what might have been the most powerful audition any of them had ever seen. But there was something else, something that made them all deeply uncomfortable. The performance had felt too real, too raw, as if they hadn't been watching acting at all, but rather a soul laying itself bare. Within hours of Rebecca's audition, word began to spread through Hollywood's intricate network of assistants, agents, and executives. The story grew with each telling the mysterious woman who had appeared out of nowhere, the performance that had left seasoned professionals speechless, the tape that was already being called legendary by those who had heard about it secondhand. But as the whispers grew louder, something strange began to happen. The more people who claimed to have heard about the audition, the fewer people seemed willing to talk about it openly. It was as if an invisible hand was orchestrating a campaign of silence. Maria Castellanos returned to her office that evening to find her assistant, Jenny, wide-eyed with curiosity. "I heard something incredible happen today," Jenny said, barely containing her excitement. "Is it true? Did someone really just walk in and blow everyone away?" Maria hesitated before answering. The professional thing to do would be to deflect, to maintain the confidentiality that was standard in their business. But the image,